This is a quick demonstration of how to provision a Kubernetes cluster in the Azure Container Service. We're going to achieve this by provisioning a Linux VM into which we'll install some tooling, like the Microsoft Azure cross-platform command line tooling, as well as the Azure SDK for Python. And it's with those two packages that we're going to actually provision the Kubernetes cluster at the command line. So this will be a nice, efficient way to really provision a Kubernetes cluster, and it's a great lead-in for the next lab where we'll kind of deploy some applications into this cluster. So we're going to begin by provisioning a Linux VM, and that will allow us to basically go ahead and act as kind of a worker node to provision the cluster. This Linux VM that we provision and create is going to be used to tunnel in to the Kubernetes cluster and perform operations there. So rather than doing this on a Mac or Windows machine, it's probably easiest to stick with the native operating system of Linux, and that's what we're about to see. The steps here basically demonstrate how we're going to provision through the portal the steps and procedures to provision this VM and get it up and running with the Azure cross-platform tooling and the Python SDK. So this is basically what the Kubernetes cluster looks like. We'll have master nodes, which we will control the cluster through. They manage the workloads. And then the agent node, that's where the containers run and the users connect to. So one of the things we want to start to do is just get a raw Linux VM that we can work with to do all our work for us. So we're going to go search for Ubuntu at the Azure portal. We'll get the latest version, 16.10, and we'll click Create. Now from here we'll enter some basic information like the name of the machine, the username and password, and the resource group, all that basic stuff that we need. Go ahead and click OK. We're going to choose a small DS1-V2, and then we'll pretty much agree with all the defaults here and click Create after the validation passes. So from here, in a few moments, we'll have a Linux machine we can get set up. After just a few moments, the provisioning is complete. What we want to do now is get the public IP address so we can SSH into the node and start installing the Azure toolkit as well as Python. So let's go ahead now and grab this IP address, which we'll need to connect up to and SSH into the node. So I'm going to get set up here in MOBA, which is free for the trial version. I'll create a new session, and I'm going to go over here and choose SSH. I will paste in the IP address. I will specify a username of Azure user. I will go into some of the advanced settings, and what I want to do as well is always go in as root. So I'll go sudo su, which will get me in as root, and I believe that's going to get us started. We'll call this session name Python Linux. And click OK. And now we're ready to remote in. So I'll just double click on this and it should bring me in. I'll type in the password that I specified during provisioning, and that ought to get us into the VM. If I can type in the password correctly. I'm going to save the password for future connections. And I'm in as root. So I'm going to go here and pull this out here and kind of fit it into my screen here. Let's go ahead and align this up. And I can do Control mouse arrow up to increase the size of the font. So ready to go here. Everything seems to be working. We now need to install some of the tooling. Okay, one of the first things we want to do is update the advanced packaging tool from Ubuntu. So we'll just say apt-get update. And this will take a few moments to kind of update all the packages that make installation possible. Now that that's complete, let's go on to our next step. So now we need the Node Package Manager, which is one of the first steps to installing the Azure cross-platform tooling. So we'll just say apt-get install npm, and we'll say yes, and it will install the Node Package Manager, used later on in the process. In fact, it'll be used in the next step. Okay, at this point we are ready to install the Azure cross-platform tooling now that we've got the NPM, the Node Package Manager, ready to go. So let's do that next. So let's go ahead and type in that command here and hit enter. So this will take a few moments for it to paste in, so let's give it just a couple moments. And we have completed the process. Okay, let's do some file linking next here to make sure when we type in Node.js, the appropriate binaries get called out. So that's what we're doing next. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. And now we ought to be able to issue some basic Azure commands. And it looks good here. Azure now is up and running. So that part is done. The next part is to install the Python SDK on top of this. So let's get to that next. So the next step here is the apt install python pip command, which will install the Python utility pip. So let's go ahead and do that next. Okay, so now we're going to install the Python Azure SDK. Go ahead and copy. Okay, let's do that one next. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this final command. Shouldn't be necessary according to the instructions, but I found that it was needed in my case.